What's your message to people that are out there not having fun?
There is help. Now we know that the brain is able to learn and has neuroplastic abilities, and it can heal. There are solutions. Therapy is no fun. It is not a fun process. It is the rehashing of negative experiences, the rehashing of uncomfortable sensations and emotions and feelings. However, these things do pass and we are malleable. We're able to shift and change. What's next for me? Where else can I go? Is there more to explore? Then we can create something really magical. As we see our bodies behave in a certain way, how can we create an image that represents the
Welcome back to The Boundless Body. So check this out. 63.5% of you who are regular listeners haven't subscribed yet to the show. So please take a moment. It would be really helpful to click subscribe. It's free of charge. It will really help us out. In turn, we'll help you out by bringing you better and better content. Along those lines, send us an email with your feedback, boundlessbodypod@gmail.com. Send us your feedback about how you think we can do better. Give us questions to address on the show, interviewees you'd like us to interview. It'd be super helpful. Okay. Let's be a community. Hey, everybody. I got Zina Ortiz with me today on The Boundless Body. Welcome, Zina.
Thank you, Dr. B.
Yeah, we're going to do some interdisciplinary jamming. You game?
I am. I'm ready. I'm pumped.
All right, cool. Yeah, you got this multimodal approach to psychotherapy and trauma resolution, which is something I'm a big fan of, in the world of, branding. In order to make it in the world, you got to kind of brand yourself. And I kind of resist specialization. I don't think it's great for the mind. It's kind of the cause of kind of brain rot, I think. I think it's good to just keep things diversified. And that's kind of the image of a healthy coral reef, for example, is biodiversity, a diversity of, different colors and shapes and species and so on. And I think that's true for the mind in psychotherapy as well. So I'm really excited to have another interdisciplinary person here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to just read out your bio here, as is the ritual. Zina Ortiz is a licensed psychotherapist, entrepreneur, and the visionary founder of Elephant in the Room Trauma Counseling, a practice dedicated to supporting pre-licensed clinicians and master's level mental health providers. With a specialization in complex trauma, PTSD, and mood disorders, she has spent her career helping individuals navigate healing through a deep understanding of trauma and neurology. Elephant in the Room Trauma Counseling, Zina, that's in Colorado, right?
Correct. Yes.
Nope.
We're mainly based in Colorado.
Based in Colorado. Okay. So I'm wondering if you could just tell our audience a little bit about your own journey with trauma, because that's how a lot of us get into the field, of course. So if you could just throw down your story, just bring us into the world of Zina's trauma history and a lot of this stuff we learned from the inside out. And just bring us into your world of learning and teaching.
Well, I can tell you, I guess, a little bit of pride in that I've been privileged that I have had extensive traumatic experiences that include sexual abuse, physical abuse, profound neglect. As a little baby, and I was not an expected baby, my mother was not looking to have a child. And I was born in Mexico, and in Mexican culture, there is the belief that boys are worth more than females. That having a male boy firstborn is by far the most desirable outcome. Has the most desirable outcome. So when I came out, my mother really didn't have a whole lot of knowledge of child development. The first few years of my life were spent in my crib or my playpen. And I still have memories of sitting in my playpen, looking out to the world and not really understanding and feeling very abandoned. My mother just was there to provide me with food and basic needs, but I wasn't socialized in the way that ideally one would expect to be. And I was delayed in many areas of my life in my early childhood. developmentally delayed in regards to walking, movement, socialization. All of those skills I had to learn by myself with peers, but I never really felt like I could connect. But I was intrigued nonetheless. I was intrigued with emotions, particularly. I was intrigued about the magic that happens between two individuals when they're talking. And I could see there was a reaction or response with smiles or sometimes a frown or sometimes some kind of facial expression that I could not understand. That later on I understood were caused by emotions. So I was numb. I didn't know it at the time clearly that I was numb. And I engaged in some disturbing behaviors as a child caused by, again, my disturbing upbringing. There wasn't a whole lot of interaction in the home. My parents were just surviving their rocky marriage and substance use, alcoholism, codependency. And so we were left on our own as kids, me and my two brothers. So I was the oldest one. And with my peers, I was intrigued by them. Although I did never feel like I belonged, I will hang out with them and observe. I was the observer. I was the Lucy in the neighborhood. And I had a dollhouse in the back of my house in my backyard. And I will invite them to come in and tell their stories to me. So tell me about your mom and your dad and what you do. I was so intrigued. Like I wanted to know how people coexist and have this magical exchange between the two of them. So over the course of interacting with them in this way, I was able to catch up some, but I still couldn't feel. I could understand, but I couldn't relate with the feeling part. It wasn't until later on, early in my teens, my mother observed that I had disturbing behaviors. I would play with animals, but not in the way that you will expect a child to play with. I actually engage in killing of animals because I like to see their insides. Had I been raised in a more loving environment, I probably would have been a surgeon. I like to see their neurology. I like to see their biology. So pretty much I was dissecting them. I was curious about organs and what they did and what did what. And so my mother realized that I was engaging in these disturbing behaviors. And so she sent me to a psychotherapist. Thankfully, she was well-versed in emotions. So she asked me for the first time in my life at the age of 13, that is something I never heard before, which is, how are you feeling? That question just blew my mind. I was like, what is this feeling you talk about? I have none. And then she was a little curious about me. She was very curious about me. She wanted to know, well, do you have feelings? What happens when you see this? What happens when you dissect these animals? And I said, well, I'm curious. I want to see. I want to know. I want to explore organs. I want to see how things function, how things work.
So were you like gutting squirrels or something, Zina, or like rats? It was primarily your interest was rats.
Yes, rats, cats, anything that came my way.
Uh-huh. Wow. Did you expand your dissection skills over the years, or?
I remember at the age of, I believe I was either 9 or 10, and there was an empty lot across from my house. And in the empty lot was an abandoned house. And under a tree, there was a body of a man. And I was curious because I never dissected a man. And I thought, oh, what a great opportunity. There is some body under a tree that I can dissect.
A human.
So my friends, my peers saw that I was approaching this body that was under the tree. And we were all looking. And I saw that he wasn't breathing. Or if he was breathing, it was very shallow. I couldn't see any movement on his chest. Like I checked for any kind of movement as I had done with with my animals that I had already dissected. And there was none, but I didn't want to touch him because he was dirty and he was a vagrant individual. And so I grabbed a stick and I started poking him because I wanted to make sure he was already done. And so we were all surprised when he grabbed the stick and he just, you stupid kids, get out of here. So we all ran and some of the kids were scared, but I was mostly laughing at how comical the whole thing had been.
Yeah.
So that could have gone, it could have gone that way. Thankfully, it didn't.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you had this deep curiosity from a young age about what makes nervous systems and bodies tick. I can totally relate. I mean, I've been teaching neuroscience for quite some time now, and I just went to a human dissection, brain dissection course down in Southern California. And so I had an opportunity to get into the midbrain because I'm a midbrain researcher, the work of Jaak Panksepp, who was they called him the rat tickler. So he was a rat guy too. And I just love the periaqueductal gray. It's something that I go on and on and on about in my book and my work and my teaching, Grand Central Station of emotion and so on. But I was actually able to hold it. I was able to, cut up the midbrain and look at sections of the periaqueductal gray. And it was just awesome to behold the power of the human brain and to just like hold a brain in my hands. It was just like, it was a moment of reverence. It was just the beauty of it is incredible. I mean, of course, it was formaldehyde as well. So it was kind of also a bit gnarly to have that smell and the formaldehyde and stuff like that. Ideally, I would have been working with a non-fixed specimen. But of course, if you try to hold a brain that isn't fixed, it's going to just turn into like, custard or something like that. So,
yes.
So anyways, I just really appreciate that about you. And this first, sounds like this first therapist of yours met you in your curiosity, and was very curious themselves. And this was the beginning of a long story of healing for you.
Yes, that's when the true healing began. And it wasn't in healing, I don't believe, is done in one chunk of time because there's always an opportunity for healing. And I don't believe we're ever done. Whatever that done is, like we can live until we're 99 and there will always be something to resolve because, well, it's not a perfect world. And then the world is full of, culture is full of it has assaultive features. It's just how being a human is. It's just a feature of being human. We're always exposed to something that can feel offensive or negative.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We put a stick into the dark of the unknown and then you never know what's going to, bark at you, right? It's kind of the Braille method of life. You kind of feel forward into the darkness and then something wakes up out of the darkness and bites you or something like that, or surprises you because you don't know that it's alive.
Yes. Well, and then there's things that happen with friends or family, deaths or events, even something as simple as a car crash or a fender bender. I mean, those things can cause some emotional disturbance or can be triggering.
For sure.
Yes.
So you started therapy and you had this significant trauma history where there was neglect, and neglect, as I like to say to students, is like battery acid to the brain. Neglect is very, very hard on brains, hard on psyches. So you had some of that neglect, battery acid. Also, you had some sexual abuse. So you've been through a lot. How would you say, because you mentioned this first therapist, what were some of your first moments of feeling like therapy might be the path for you in terms of becoming a therapist?
Well, I knew it was my life's calling as a little child, just simply observing this environment between two individuals.
Yeah.
The,
Come
the
on into my doll house. And I just want to
yes,
hear your story and look at your face. And
yes.
yeah.
Study your
Yeah. Yeah.
face and see the movements and see whatever the energy behind the movement. I was intrigued, not with the facial expressions, but the energy that prompted those movements, those facial expressions that I could not understand. That it was still intriguing, and I was highly, highly motivated and interested in learning about. And so it culminated with the psychotherapist that I was seeing as an early teenager. And she explained to me what emotions were. And she explained it as energy inside of the body and energy that is felt. And while I understood her words, I still could not relate because of the numbness that I had been feeling. And so she was intrigued about the numbness. Well, what is numbness? What is this that you don't feel? And if you don't feel, what do you feel? Her questions prompted in me curiosity for myself. What is this thing that I don't have that I see that other people have? And so I realized that the only body part that I could feel were my feet, the bottoms of my feet. Everything else, I was a very klutzy kid and I will get bumped easily and I have bruises that I could not explain. I've never been involved in sports. It was very difficult for me to coordinate movements. I could not kick a ball or bat a baseball. That's when I started discovering that I did have feelings. It's just not on my core or my arms or my hands. And eventually started becoming curious. What else could I feel besides the bottoms of my feet?
Hmm.
And it wasn't until much later in my life, in my early 20s, when I started recognizing that, yes, I have other feelings, that I wasn't entirely numb, that there were some feelings there, but most of them had been, I guess, bottled up or pushed down as a mechanism of survival. And that home environment, I needed to be numb. I needed to have all those feelings bottled up because there was no safe space to express them or to act them out.
Hmm.
And so I felt pretty much mechanical, like a robot, like I wasn't human. Those experiences of having been neglected and abused has given me great insight of what it's like to have had trauma,
Hmm.
have trauma, because of the knowledge that I acquired, the experience that I acquired in my early childhood. I can say I know exactly how that feels. I know what it's like to be numb. I know exactly what you're going through, whoever's sitting in front of me. Of course, I know that. And so I feel well equipped to help people who are also experiencing those symptoms of
Hmm.
dissociation mainly.
Yeah.
And dissociation, of course, is part of the treatment of complex trauma, as you may know.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned that you are a survivor of sexual abuse, and with sexual abuse, a really common area to shut off neurologically and get dissociated is, of course, the pelvis, and
Yes.
also, related neurology that, for example, the adductors. The adductors are these big muscles on the insides of the thighs, and
Yes.
just generally the neurology of the legs and the pelvis tend to, at least clinically, in my experience, shut off quite a bit with sexual
Mhm.
abuse. Where do you go with that prompt? Was that so for you? What did you learn in your own body, and what have you learned over the years regarding treating pelvises in somatic psychotherapy, pelvises that have been subject to abuse?
That's a very good question. Well, one thing that I observed that I have come to understand, and this is only an observation, by the way. I don't have clinical evidence of this piece of information that I'm about to give you. But one of the things that I see consistently in patients who come to me with the experience of complex trauma is the hips are related to mom somehow. As they connect to their hips, either the right side or the left side, because of course there is this the difference between the left side and the right side of the brain or the body. There is a correlation with memories of mother and hips. Now, I understand that hips is how sexual trauma is held in the body, but that's not always true. I have had the experience of treating individuals who have not had sexual trauma that they can recall, but they have had negative experiences with their mothers. And so the trauma is held in the hips somehow. And that's very common. I don't know if there's evidence of that to be true. And I haven't seen any clinical trials in regards to that.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, what about in your own journey in terms of thawing out? Was that a key hub for you in terms of thawing out your body and your own healing process, or other areas that unlocked first? Or maybe you can just continue on telling us about your recovery process.
Yes. One of the symptoms that were very strong for me was anxiety. Anxiety was one of the first symptoms that came to me very strongly as an early adult in my early 20s. Was highly anxious, and I couldn't understand why, because the environment wasn't congruent with fear or anxiety. And I understand fear and anxiety are not the same thing, but they are related. And I was very interested and curious about the anxiety and how it manifested in my body, mainly on my chest and my throat and in the gut. As you know, trauma is held in the gut with feelings becoming so intense that I will experience nausea. The curiosity led me to explore and study more in depth about the symptoms of trauma and how they're stored in the body. And I could say that the process of exploration has been actually very fun for me. It's been fascinating and fun and exciting, and I have been enjoying myself with education and trainings on what is complex trauma, how it manifests in the body, and as you know, body parts store different sensations, different emotions. For example, stress is held in the shoulders and the back of the neck, and fear is held in the throat and chest, and anger is held in the jaw. Because, of course, as cavemen and cave women, that we still are cavemen and cave women, our bodies are still primitive that way. We used to fight like this. Mm-hmm. It's pressed in the hands also and part of the arms. And so it has been a fascinating and fun experience for me overall.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that it's been a fun and fascinating experience, that you've, that from a young age, you were really interested in guts, and eviscerating creatures and looking on the inside. And now in a way, it's kind of like, well, life eviscerated you and ripped you open, and you're just really curious about looking down and noticing how it all works and enjoying the process of learning. And that's what I'm hearing from you, that you've been gutted by life and you're just along for the ride and having fun.
Yes, it has been. That's an interesting metaphor. Thank you for that. Yes, a contrast, right? I've been doing the same thing in a different way. Yes, and culminating in what I do now, which is teaching and the training of clinicians. This has been exciting to me also. The treatment of individuals, and I'm weaning out of that. I have enjoyed that experience, but I feel like at this point in my profession, I'm having more fun training clinicians and teaching them all of these things that I know, including my personal experience and what it was to have felt neglect, what it was to have felt trauma, what was triggering, what caused what.
What's your advice for folks that are miserable out there? They've been traumatized in their they're feeling the opposite of what you've described. You've described, oh, well, I'm along for the ride and it's fun and it's a learning experience. It's a learning adventure. What about for the folks out there that are miserable? Like, for me, when I was in my 20s, I was anxious and miserable. I had feelings in my throat as well. So the throat has been a kind of somatic hub for me in my own process. And I was quite miserable. What's your message to people that are out there not having fun,
Oh,
with the re-education process, trauma
yes.
healing process?
Well, and there is help because, back in the day, oh, this wasn't too long ago, when it was believed that the brain had no capacity to learn or no neuroplasticity past a certain age. But now we know that the brain is able to learn and has neuroplastic abilities and it
Hmm.
can heal. There are solutions. And every member of my group, every member of my team undergoes the same training that I have had experience via myself, and with the added bonus that I integrate modalities that are all one big package. It's not just one modality, it's a package from the moment the client walks into the door, how they present themselves, how to sit, how to be present, how to sell an idea of a treatment. Because I have to admit, therapy is no fun. Let's be honest here. It is not a fun process. It is the rehashing of negative experiences, the rehashing of uncomfortable sensations and emotions and feelings. However, these things do pass. They're never static. No one ever stays in one emotional state. It's not possible for that to happen. We are malleable. We're able to shift and change. And so with that, we sell an idea, we sell a treatment that the client can feel confident about, that we're going towards a direction. Not necessarily a destination, but more like a marker on the side of the road that they can say, oh, I achieved this. What's next for me? Where else can I go? Where else can I take this? Is there more to explore? So the selling of those ideas, using neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapeutic techniques, helps the client see themselves go moving towards a trajectory, not just sitting down and I don't want to feel this way. Well, that's all great, but how can we create an image that represents the change that they're looking to achieve without them knowing or without them being fully aware of where that's the destination or mile marker is?
Hmm. Yeah. It's a curious image. I like to use that image myself, that a portion of therapy is sales. Um,
Yes.
Part of the structure of being a student in a way is naivete. I certainly was that way for myself when I was learning and training how to be a clinician and everything, that there's some idealization of what therapy is about. And so I find that some students are like, what? Sales? What are you talking about? Like, I'm in it for the healing. I'm here to serve. I'm here to be a helper on planet Earth. And I want to do good by people. And there's something about the image of sales that people get allergic to, but that's an important part of therapy. You gotta sell the next stage of development to a person. Now, their conscious mind might say, "Oh yeah, I want to get better." I see this in couples therapy all the time.
Yes.
Oh, we want to get better, but like their unconscious is allergic to healing.
Oh, yeah, because we go to that which is familiar, even when it's crappy.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And so, do you find that with some students, they don't like the image of sales in therapy? Like you're trying to sell an image of therapy.
Well, as a trainer and
Yeah.
supervisor, I have to sell the idea of being a salesman or a sales.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
I can relate. I can relate.
I have
Yeah,
to practice what I preach.
yeah, yeah, for
Yes,
sure. Yeah.
yes, and I think that the selling of an idea, whatever that is, for a patient or a clinician, I don't believe it's any different. They're both ideas, but an idea can be best grasped with an image, with something that one can perceive with senses, like a color or touch or temperature, or it can be warm, it can be a sunny day, it can be the blue sky, it can taste sweet, or it can smell like roses, you see. And so engaging the senses supports the sale of that idea. I think it's a more successful way of selling whatever that thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the image, I think Alan Watt said something like, the whole point of all this healing stuff and spirituality is to just be a little bit kinder as a human, which isn't a particularly sexy or flashy or, kind of rainbow hued image of healing and growth, but it's humble and realistic, like that we can become a little bit more kind. And I just think that's so lovely, I think that's so human.
Right.
We're on this path to just be a bit kinder to ourselves, be a bit kinder to each other.
That's key, is the kindness to oneself, because what trauma teaches the person is how to treat itself, himself or herself. It's very common to see people being cruel to themselves, either with words or behaviors, because that's all they know. And neurology only practices what it knows. And so if one is raised in an environment where there is a lack of love, well, naturally, the individual is going to engage with itself in this lack of love, the relationship, right? Because we are here as humans in relationship with the other, whatever that other is, right? But the other, the relationship, I believe, begins with self, right? With what the body has learned, and the relationship with what the observer is, and it's both the observer and the behavior. And creating that split, then we can create something really magical as we see our bodies behave in a certain way that may or may not be to our highest advantage. Then the observer can have a distance from the suffering.
Yeah. So you've been trained in Pat Ogden's sensorimotor psychotherapy. You mentioned that your training program at Elephant in the Room has some overlap with sensorimotor psychotherapy. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a bit about your journey so far as finding Pat Ogden's work, your training, and how you've added to it, and maybe some of the core principles of the work.
Well, Pat Ogden's trainings, they're based here out of Colorado, out of Boulder. And so that was easy for me to attend. What fascinated me is that, and Pat Ogden doesn't present it in that way, but that was my understanding, is that the body creates a solution where there's no solution, or that at least there was no solution in the moment. And the body doesn't know the difference between past, present, future. For the body, everything is happening right here, right now, right? When there's a trigger, the event is happening right now, even though nothing's going on. We're just here having a pleasant conversation, you and I.
Yeah, if I think about a leaf blower or something like that, the past, the present, and the future all merge together, and my nervous system is just, leaf blowers,
Correct, right.
Do you like leaf blowers? I didn't want to offend you.
I'm impartial to them, but I don't appreciate.
You're impartial. Wow. You're okay. So you're advanced.
But if you mention it enough, now I'm going to pay attention. The body creates solutions in the moment, and they can create solutions. For example, it can create a defensive stand or a defensive pose where there was none available at the time where the real event happened. When trauma happens, two things happen, right? There's the event, and then there is the experience. And the experience is stored in the body, right? With sensations and the movement of. And so if we really stretch time and slow it down, the body will create a physical solution to resolve the experience that had been stored in the body. So that was my understanding. That's what really clicked for me, is allowing for the body natural mechanism, natural movements. And then movements don't always need to be organized. They can, sometimes they can be totally disorganized. They don't need to be understood. Sometimes it can be just a release with a jerk or a shake that creates the release, the central nervous system release. And that can be enough. And that's felt. It's not something that can be cognitively understood, but it's something that is felt, that that the body really gets and understands.
Yeah, so there's natural impulses in the organism towards safety that get thwarted. I call these impulses, especially insofar as trauma goes, the thwarted impulse. In Hakomi, there's a term called the organic wish.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these are just kind of fancy terms for there's a natural way that the body wants to express its potency, its freedom, its direction of ease. It's kind of like escape hatches, which are very specific motor plans, sensory motor plans to get out of a bad situation that feels bad. But then those impulses get thwarted and stuck in the nervous system as action plans.
Right. Well,
that don't get deployed, right? That they get thwarted. And I'm just, and this is, to me, I think this stuff is kind of universal in the somatic arts. We just have these different brands and different ways of talking about them. So I'm just curious. I don't have sensorimotor psychotherapy's brand and like their way of understanding this stuff, but I think it's pretty universal stuff with different names.
It is. And they're different labels, but I know that they all represent the same idea, same set of ideas, right? And we tend to thwart or disturb or stop the process because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to sit in the discomfort and to really let the body create its own. I mean, naturally, we avoid discomfort and we stop it like, oh, that's weird. I'm going to soothe myself. But that disrupts the natural mechanism that the body is creating, the movement or the shaking or the jerkiness or whatever that is. And the coaching of it takes coaching. I teach clinicians the coaching of sitting in a profound space of dark and discomfort. But that's where healing really is at.
Yeah. The profound place of darkness and discomfort. It's interesting, because I live in Silicon Valley and I kind of got to sell therapy to folks that are mainly just obsessed with efficiency a lot of the time, with getting better, like, for example, working with a classical man who's all about logic, and distance from his emotions. And really, a lot of men, of course, are alcoholics, isolated alcoholics, workaholics, whatever aholics. I mean, it's more common to have workaholics out here.
Yes.
But to sell the darkness and getting into the darkness, the stigma with mental health and with therapy is that we'll just kind of drag them through the hot coals of their life or something like that. And it's not going to lead to being more effective or efficient in work. But that's the sales pitch for me with some of these folks is like, listen, getting into your emotions, getting into those held and blocked emotions in your body is going to make you more charismatic as a father. It's going to make you better and more emotionally intelligent as a worker. And essentially, in the end, more efficient. Like maybe in the short term, your efficiency and effectiveness might go down a bit, but it's going to be coming back in spades.
Right. Yes. And that's where the idea of going into the darkness, into those dark corners and spaces, and then there's intense fear for going there. We can only grow in discomfort. We don't grow in cushiness and comfort and everything's okay. It's just
Well, the belly grows a bit. I find like my belly grows a little bit.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The thing too is that what happened happened, and there's no way to change that. It's done. Thankfully, the person somehow survived. And when they're sitting in front of us, that alone is success.
Mhm.
That is profound success. And so what we're looking to do is look at the echoes of the past that are stored in the body, that they're only sensations. They're not the real thing. The real thing has passed. What we're looking at is the echoes, the feelings, sensations, and seeing how they're maybe tightly clustered or tense or knotted up.
Mhm.
And so in looking at these things, these echoes, the knots, the tightness, we can find something really beautiful inside that helped the person survive. Somehow they did. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sitting in front of us. And that's where we can clearly see that although the person survived, it didn't kill his spirit. And yes, there is a spiritual part. There is the full spiritual experience of having survived that somehow, by some miracle, because sometimes there are miracles that they're come through our doors to seek help, to seek healing, that we find, wow, what magnificent human beings they are that they made it.
Mhm.
It's really remarkable.
So when did you do your sensorimotor psychotherapy training?
Oh, I completed that 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay. And then, so this was an early training for you, or middle of the road, or where was this in terms of your wider map of development?
I don't know if it was halfway through my development. My main motivation for seeking different kinds of modalities or learning different kinds of modalities was the healing of myself.
Mhm.
And while I healed, I also wanted to learn. And I did that in a very short amount of time. As I learned more, I healed more, and I became more curious and wanted to learn more. So I invested a great deal of my time, a great deal of whatever little money I had to find the solution to the thing that had been afflicting me.
Mhm.
And the culmination of the trainings was actually when I started integrating medicines. That's when it really clicked for me that, wow, we can go much deeper. And I'm not saying it's a magic cure, because there's no magic cures. We don't sell snake oil on my practice.
Yeah.
It is an aid. It is a tool that helps us get deeper and deeper into the layers of unconscious, layers of trauma.
Mhm.
And we can create bigger shifts, bigger changes for people, and supporting them in a much deeper way.
Oh, so you're referring to psychedelics.
Yes, I have double certification in psychedelic-assisted therapy. Yes. And this is a modality. These are modalities that I also teach to my clinicians and my practice. The
Okay.
legal, by the way, only cannabis and ketamine.
Cannabis and ketamine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting. So then that's it's part of the bigger journey there. But insofar as your relationship with the Sensory Motor Institute and all that stuff, I'm just curious about principle of the thwarted impulse. What I call the thwarted impulse is where the body wants to do something, for example, wants to growl or bare its teeth. And that's just what the organism wants to do. And because it's been so socially conditioned out of us, Of course, it gets bit back by the neuromusculature of the jaw and the throat and so on. And there's certain things that we want to say, impulses to say things. Was that instinct already there in you before you entered the sensory motor program? You know, like that instinct of reading a neurology that was holding stuff? Or was it an insight that you developed during that training? Or just tell us a little bit about your journey reading Thwarted Impulses. Maybe share with us a little bit about some work you did with a clinician as a client where you discovered your own thwarted impulse and some of your journey, you know, on the client end of things.
Right. Yes. Well, going with the idea of thwarted impulse, there is also the opposite, that is resistance. Resistance to dive deep into the core of whatever that is, trauma. And trauma can encompass many different experiences inside of the body. And my interest had been, while also looking at this resistance, finding out what is that about. And of course, there's the protector, right? And if we talk about internal family systems modality, where that includes the resistance as part of the mechanism of survival. And that prompted me to seek even more training. But the medicine was far more intriguing to me in relationship to this resistance that I was developing that prevented me to dive deeper into my own wounding. And up until recently, actually, it was, I think it was 6 months ago, I did my own internal journey using MDMA as a medicine to find something in me that I had been storing that I wasn't fully aware of, that I suspected something was there. It was just out of reach for me emotionally. I knew something was there. I just couldn't reach or feel or sense. And so when the medicine came and it became activated inside of me, I was able to grasp it and understand and get and like fully sit in it. And that's when I realized as a child, I had been touched by my father at night. He came into my room consistently. And then all those memories just came to me, but in a softer way. It wasn't a brutal blow. And I feel as if I have achieved a level of healing because now I'm sharing it here with you. And it's of course it's disturbing. It's a disturbing memory, but I don't feel disturbed by it. I can tell you this happened to me, but I'm okay with it. I made it. I survived. I'm here. I feel well, not because of what happened, but because of who I am right now and where I am in my trajectory, in my healing. Yeah. And I can look at the past and feel sad about it, but I'm not emotionally flooded by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's how healing feels, because I know what healing feels. Then I can share it with my patients and with my clinicians, and I can tell them, given a little hope, a hopeful thought of, this is how it feels. You can share that experience, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not big. It doesn't feel heavy or highly triggering.
Yeah. Yeah. In the EMDR approach, that's one of the assessment pathways, is to hold a memory, a traumatic memory in your mind and see if it still has a charge. And I put that in air quotes right now, a charge.
A charge.
Because it's kind of a vague term. But in another way, charge is very, very visceral. In fact, it's the basic binary or the basic language of the nervous system, charge and discharge, you know, charging up of electrical elements and then discharging across the synapse and so on, or volume transmission. We have the release of, you know, chemicals and molecules, peptides, all that stuff. I think that's a great assessment technique. Does the memory still have a charge? Can you talk about using the narrative? Can you tell the story without getting disorganized? And maybe even a step further is, can you have a bit of a sense of humor about it? Now, some of this stuff is really gnarly to have a sense of humor about.
Yes.
But you were telling your narrative with a smile. You know what I mean? And you were,
Yeah.
even before, you're talking about your experiences being fun, a fun adventure. And it's like, oh, okay, that's new.
Mm-hmm.
That's new. You've been abused. You've been subject to sexual abuse, and you can now look back on it and say, oh, well, yeah, that was a fun adventure. That's interesting. You don't hear that a lot.
No, no. I talk about it as a fun adventure, not because I'm dissociated from it. Well, I lived it. I was there. I felt it. Yeah, even in a dissociated way of being numb about it. But I like to call it adventure because as I look back and I can imagine as an older woman, as I maybe take my last breath in my deathbed, I can look back and say, boy, that was a rich life. I've had every experience imaginable in one lifetime where I also experienced success in healing, success in helping others like me. That's where I come from this place of empowerment that, wow, I made it. Wow, that's amazing. I came from that. And look at me now. I'm here to tell the story and share it with you and tell you that there is a way out.
You talked about resistance. We were going in the direction of articulating what a thwarted impulse is, and brought us in the direction of, encountering resistance, which is there. Resistance is there in us everywhere. It's like, some even say baked into the fabric of things as inertial forces in the universe or something like that.
Yes.
But, now you have like 25 clinicians that you are supporting in their pathway of development at Elephant in the Room, right?
Precisely.
And so you have, as a supervisor myself, I have not only access to my own cases, but all the cases of my supervisees to draw from in terms of providing examples for people. So I'm wondering if we could cast the net wide in terms of the work that you are doing with your trainees and so on, and talk about some cases. Obviously, you're not going to say the actual names of people and stuff like that. But we're going to talk somatic psychology cases. Let's look for the thwarted impulse, people that have been subject to a motor vehicle accident or sexual abuse, where the symptoms are very clearly, what we're looking for is symptoms that are very clearly showing up in how a body is expressing itself through its face, through its motions, through its lack of motions, and so on. Let's talk cases.
Okay. I'm excited to share with you a very interesting case. As you were talking, I was already, boom, I'm already there. I got this.
Good.
There was this woman, she had experienced a car accident, and it was disturbing her to the point that it was very scary for her to drive. It was very difficult for her to drive. In fact, she had attended my first few sessions on an Uber. She couldn't drive herself. And so she wanted to get back into driving. She enjoyed driving, and it was this event that really prevented her from enjoying and doing whatever she needed to do and being independent. We did an introductory session, and we created for her body, and I taught her how to be in her body, how to feel, how to sit in discomfort, how to sense, how to express these things that were happening inside of her. How things move or shift, or energies like sadness moving inside of her chest, or fear moving inside of her throat, or tensing up her throat. And so identifying and describing the sensations in her body and letting her body just do whatever it needed to do. So the first few sessions were a series of movements that we couldn't identify, but mainly in the introduction of this is no interpretation, no need to interpret any of it, because the body is complex and it has its own language that sometimes we can understand and sometimes we can't. letting the body just do what it needed to do. And it came to a point, and it culminated to 1-2 hour session. It was an extended session where her body began to create an organized movement. And so her arm came up to this point. It was highly uncomfortable for her, where she sat in this position, and also with her right leg, in a defensive way. So it made sense because the car had hit her to the right. She had stopped the car from hitting her. Neurology has no access to logic. It doesn't.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course, it's not logic. We can't stop a car with an arm or a foot.
Yeah.
But the body created this movement where it started to feel okay to go there. And also in the discomfort, and it was highly uncomfortable for her to sit in this position and allowing her body to create the movement, that she became aware of a rape that happened decades ago. And so the movement also resolved the rape in a strange and convoluted way that we were unable to understand. She couldn't understand how it had also prompted that, but it also created the solution for that. So it was 2 for the price of 1, treatment for the price of 1. Knocking 2 birds with 1 stone. So that was absolutely perfect. She couldn't understand how, and I told her, we don't need to logic our way through this. If it feels right for you, if you can tell the story and not feel disturbed, or that you feel the charge, then I will say that that's a successful treatment. And I haven't seen her since. And she came back for the integration session and to assimilate what had happened. And she walked away happy after that. Faded away into the sunset with a feeling of resolution for those 2 events that she had experienced.
Yeah. So was there emotions that came up? Was her body shaking? Was she sweating? What were some indicators that the trauma was going out of her body in that moment?
Extremely tension, and she felt like a statue, and she was in this fixed position, a moment that for her seemed like forever.
Yeah.
And it was only 5 minutes, but she just sat there in this comfort, sitting with it, while also in connection with me, while the accident didn't happen in connection with another person. The rape did. It was a disturbing connection with another human being, and creating a resolution with me while expressing it also. The co-sharing of that experience creates a different internal experience, a different relationship with the event. With the internal experience, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, from a motor systems perspective, sensory motor systems perspective, there's the organism, of course, is embedded in a physics, in a reality of physical phenomenon. And with a car accident, the car is coming from a precise angle, a precise vector, a precise physics, and the organism is responding in a very specific way based on that vector physics, if we want to call it that, right? And then the whole system, the whole organism is organized around trying to protect itself in that way. And because the brain is an integrated system, this gesture, this motor gesture, is wired up and hooked up to the deep limbic core, the deep emotional core.
Right. Yes.
So if we're doing the gesture of defense in a way that's really, really integrated with the whole brain, then it would make sense, right? That the brain, once it's taken care of the major thing to attend to, which is safety, because this car is coming from this direction right now that it's done this gesture at full potency, thwarted impulse, right? The thwarted impulse to protect oneself in a very powerful way. And now that that's been taken care of, that kind of core safety need that's been taken care of. Now let's take care of this deeper emotional need that has to do with the sexual abuse.
Right. The feeling of empowerment over having had that defense movement. Yes, that was not available for either one of those events. And what also is valuable in these healing experiences is the integration of cognition via language. Because it's not just limbic, it's also cognitive and expressing it, because language is a function of cognition. That's why talk therapy doesn't work. There's no such thing as talk therapy, right? It is the integration of the experience with language, formulating what is happening in the present using words. This is happening. This is really uncomfortable. And I'm here and I'm fighting, and I have this dance that feels really uncomfortable yet powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Putting words to the gesture can really pop things.
Yes.
Yeah.
While also engaging with the other, which at the time it was myself. And that also creates a relationship, not just with me, but also internal. The mirroring, it has this mirroring effect that it's okay that it's happening, normalizing it, that whatever's happening is perfectly okay, however uncomfortable it is.
Do you think that there's a lot of folks that even though they're comfortable enough to add a phrase to a gesture, like let's say the phrase is no, which is a powerful phrase, no. Sure. And a lot of people, of course, repress their no's. Do you think a lot of folks want to throw some F-bombs in there or other cuss words and end up not doing it?
I don't promote that.
You don't promote that?
No, let me tell you why. The way that I teach clinicians how to work with words is letting the words come from their bodies.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. Creating sure. Their own language, not from cognition.
Oh, so thank God. So most likely people are swearing a lot then.
Surprisingly, they don't.
That's crazy. I don't think you're in the midbrain then.
The thing is that even saying something as simple as I'm sad, as they're crying or they're feeling the waves of sadness, is so difficult for people to express coming from their gut or coming from the place of sadness. And expressing emotions where they may have come from an environment where there was no room to express emotions.
Yeah.
And so expressing them in the present takes a lot of trials that may need time to evolve, to unfold, and eventually say, I'm sad. For whatever reason, maybe they came from an environment. I have treating a patient who being sad means being weak. And so moving beyond the idea of weak, of what does it mean to be weak and how it's not really useful to her in the present. Maybe it was useful in the past, but now she doesn't need this resistance, right? The set of internal rules, or carrying mom inside because we all carry our parents, but there's nothing we can do about the external parents. But what we can do with the internal rules or the parenting that we carry inside can be shifted and changed and transformed into something different. And so that the language comes from the way that I teach clinicians is that it must come from internal. It must come from the wound, from the place of wounding where this feels, I'm sad or I feel sad, and letting it release and unfold on its own like a flower. Because you wouldn't want to open a butterfly. You let it open all by itself, because that's where strength comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I find especially with women that have been boundaries have kind of been taken from them. Their boundaries have been put upon. They've been intruded on. and the aggressive act of establishing one's boundaries. Sometimes establishing one's boundaries needs to be an aggressive act, of self-protection. Women that have kind of packaged that aggressive aggression away, and that voice that says, no, stop, back off, that it's been really, really important and sometimes clinically crucial for them to swear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the neurology of swearing is quite interesting. I don't know if you've studied the neurology of swearing at all. The swearing is actually organized in a different region of the brain than Broca's area, the complex language area of the brain.
Yes.
And so it's actually closer to the emotional core than Broca's.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. In fact, it's quite interesting. I've worked with some folks with chromosomal damage before, and some people that don't have access to complex language, and what they can do is swear. They don't have access to any complex language, but they can swear to express emotion.
Right.
So they don't have access to, they can, of course, do some body gestures to express the intensity of their emotion. But when it comes to language, they actually don't have the organismic reality in their Broca's area, their left hemisphere of the brain.
Right.
But they can swear.
Right.
To express the emotion.
Well, I can see the value of that, and that I believe that will be secondary to having had the expression of the wounding, and that and the expression of a swearing can be something that can be promoted afterwards, after the healing, after the wounding has been expressed. So you can't. I believe that while that has value, it's something that is taught and is learned, and it covers the real wounding, the voice of the wound that is still there or may still be there, unspoken, unrecognized, and validated.
Well, I'm sorry. What are you saying about secondary? I find it hard sometimes to discern what's secondary and what's first. I mean, is the process of healing linear or something? Or?
No, no. And healing is not linear. Neither is trauma. I mean, we're talking about many varying layers of stuff that we're working. It's not a one formula cures all. It's nothing like that. What I was saying, and what I mean to say is that I see the value of the expression of curse words. Yeah, I see the value of that. Highly valuable. I also see the value of the expression of the wounding, the woundedness. Yeah, the sad, the pain, the stabby, the heartbrokenness.
Yeah, like the feeling of like, I don't have a voice to say anything, whether it's swearing or whatever it is.
Right. Precisely that.
Ooh.
You can't say it. Yeah, it can't be formulated.
Well, even the face, this is back to faces, one of the things that I josh around about with students is that our job in somatic therapy is to unfuck the face. Because our faces are fucked.
Yes.
Right? Because they're so put upon by all these social rules. I like to even say that the text of the rules is written into the musculature, the sensory motor architecture, architectonics of the face.
Yes.
So there's all these rules about what we can and cannot express, or, where it's okay and where it's not okay to express. Like we can do certain things with our lips and stuff as we're speaking on a podcast that are okay, and things that aren't okay to do with our lips and our facial neurology and stuff like that. But, there's a whole frontier of taboo expressions.
Yes.
That, I really think this gets back to the adventure piece. What would a unfucked face express in the current modern era of podcasting? put upon, you and I, in terms of the range of what a face can do. We're kind of held in a particular range. Right? We might be able to do things like that, just for fun, maybe. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts about the face in the modern era?
Well, the programming, right? What is okay to do and what is not okay to do. I mean, we're all programmed to behave or perform in a certain way. I don't know that we will ever be outside of the constraints of social norms. I don't know that that's possible, because everything can be a constraint. Anything can be considered a constraint.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're human. We live by a certain set of rules, social.
Don't pick your nose in public, and definitely not on a podcast. But, when I go to the freaking zoo or something like that, I just went to the San Francisco Zoo this weekend and I saw a gorilla picking its nose just in front of 20 people or whatever watching it. And it's just sitting there, just kind of really digging in there and stuff, I'm like, gosh, that's just simple gesture of freedom. Why can't we pick our noses anymore? That's lame. Our organisms want to pick. There's stuff in there,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can also. It can also be said that why can't we just burp or fart?
Yeah. Why can't we just fart? Yeah, I had an old timer healer who she was one of my early teachers in somatics, and one of the things that she used to do is she liked to walk into the room, where everything is quite tense, and the students like the first moment to class, and she used to love to just rip a fart and offer it as an expression of permission for the organism to do whatever it wants to do, right? Which I always thought was quite edgy. I still, to this day, can't enter a space and just kind of let one rip, She was badass in that way. I'm like, dude, a meanie, like what? I mean, she had some mojo going on. That's some courage to be an animal.
That takes real courage right there.
You don't start classes like that with your mentees, do you?
Well, I do promote the.
It's like somebody else wants to do it. We'll open the space for anybody who wants to right now.
But just not open the space, but open the windows too.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. No. Well. If you really think about the process of burping or letting it rip, as you said, those are releases. Those are central nervous system releases. Even yawning is a release of tension in the jaw. Right? Yeah. Coughing is a release. Yawning and jerking and farting.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's pretty radical. That's pretty revolutionary. I wouldn't engage in that without the window open, but yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, Freud got it wrong about a lot of stuff, I think. He also got it right. His stuff about the terrible twos and the potty training stuff is that, and the somatic psychologist later took his work talking about the so-called, anal retentiveness and the anal phase of development as like, this is literal. This isn't just, talking about the psyche or the mind in some abstract way, but the rules of society literally write themselves onto our anal sphincter muscles. This is literal. This is concrete. Yes. I mean, just recently I worked on a client who had some anal dreams about taking poops and stuff like that. She's been struggling with, constipation. Like we see in so many clients, a lot of folks that struggle with physical constipation struggle with like emotional constipation or being able to express their emotions, right? This is anal retentiveness. So Freud got it right that there's something in the core tube, in the core neurology that's holding down below, and as below, so above, and there's just a problem with the core plumbing.
Precisely, is the body holding emotion, holding the experience, holding something that is difficult to let go, or there's no space to release. That can't find a safe place to release, or it's not safe to be okay or just be.
Yeah. So Zina, do you work with dreams?
My training is based in Young. I graduated from Pacifica Graduate Institute and from Santa Barbara, and we
Oh,
study
cool.
mainly Young. It's not something that I provide, but I understand the symbology of dreams and how every object, every character represents something for the person
Mm-hmm.
in real life. And that's a way, dreams are a way of processing internally what is happening or has happened,
Mm-hmm.
or a way for neurology to understand or for subconscious to understand and grasp and assimilate an idea or an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. I find dreams fascinating also.
Yeah, cool. That's great that you trained at Pacifica. Pacifica is great. I think it's one of the great creative graduate institutions out there for psychology. I really admire
Hmm.
Pacifica. So, could you walk us through a little bit about your multimodal training? So, you're training folks to do trauma resolution work, correct?
Yes.
And you're doing so with a multimodal lens. And one of those lenses is the sensorimotor lens in terms of how the body is holding on to thwarted impulses and whatever language you use for that. What else are you teaching in the curriculum? What other modalities? And maybe you could just give us a brief overview of how you train clinicians and a couple bullet points for each modality.
I see. Yes. Well, the training, as I shared with you earlier in this conversation, includes how to enter the room, how to bring presence, how to sit in the space in front of the other, how to listen, how to sell an idea using neurolinguistic programming, using symbols, using hypnotherapeutic techniques to sell, also support and sell ideas or sell treatment plans.
What's your 2 bullet points for selling a healing process? You got a couple bullet points for that?
Yes. Well, and what I like to engage my clinicians is in using imagination. Imagination is so similar to dream work.
Mm-hmm.
Imagination includes things that the body understands, such as anything that includes sensations, softness, color, texture, taste, smell, anything that is sensory can promote and support the selling of that idea.
So we
For
could be
example,
doing what we call like a future projection where the
correct.
person is doing a visualization of themselves in the future once they've gone past this anxiety or this symptom or
Yeah,
something like that. And you're bringing in as many senses as you can and bringing in images and so on.
precisely.
Yeah.
Because when people come and walk through our doors, they can't conceive of what it's like to feel okay. They know there is the possibility, but they can't bring it. They don't have access to the sensation. They don't have access to what it will be like to feel okay. And so telling the idea, for example, what would it be like? Can I share this image with you? You don't have to see it with me. I want you to see it as I see it. And what would it be like if Dr. B sat, I don't know, 3, 6 months from now and at a picnic table, and it's a warm, sunny day, and birds are singing, and there's an airplane flying up above, and he's having a conversation with a friend, and they're smiling and there's laughter. And Dr. B is wearing a blue t-shirt and he's wearing blue jeans. So he's all blue, but yet he's smiling. He has a radiant smile from ear to ear, and the warm air is touching his skin. How about that? How about that mile marker? Not as a destination, not as a goal, but something that we can both get there.
And then a leaf blower, somebody with a leaf blower walks by and Dr. B's smile grows and he starts to laugh and you can feel the diaphragmatic pulsation as the
Yes,
laughter rolls through his body and peels.
that will be magical. Yes. How about that?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, yeah, I'm sold.
Yes.
So, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So you got that NLP stuff where you're working directly with the subconscious, with images, mental imagery work. What else you got? What else is there in terms of your curriculum?
Clinicians are supported and they're also given a flash trainings in EMDR. When it's not a modality that I go to personally, because we're working with multiples, and I believe EMDR is best for single trauma event. It's not useful for multiple events or pre-verbal traumatic memories like neglect. I think those are far more complex to treat with just one modality. I do encourage clinicians to use the EMDR device, like the bilateral device, for soothing, but not as a method of treatment. Also, what assessment in every session, assessment of disturbing emotions, behaviors. What I also promote is a lot of internal resourcing. Does a person have support? And what kind of support systems are in place? Does a person engage in friendships that are healthy or healthy like? Not entirely healthy, but they are good sources of help when needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so resourcing is in every aspect of treatment. And also sensing what's it like to be you. So using curiosity. What's it like when you laugh? What's it like when you cry? What's this thing sadness for you? So I also integrate my experience of having been, I guess you can call it an anthropologist in Mars. What's it like to be sad? How do you experience that? Because I don't believe it's a one set of particulars for everybody. I think that the experience is different for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree about EMDR being best for, and I think the research does highlight this element that it's best for single event traumas. So when you're working with complex PTSD, I'm imagining you still do regression work. You just do it in a different way than EMDR with its kind of pacing. The way that I frame EMDR is it's just a way to pace an unpaced experience.
Right. Correct.
Trauma doesn't have a pace. It's just like everything's going bonkers. It's overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed. We're overstimulated. The cerebellum isn't sequencing, eye saccades and other things. It's unsequenced, unprocessed,
Right.
and unpaced. So each method, I think, has its way of trying to bring pacing and sequencing to phenomenon. And sounds like so you're rigorously nodding your head.
Yes.
What's your style? So you get a complex PTSD case, and you have to go event by event, and often regression is involved. But I'm just curious what your method looks like and how we're getting in there to the complex network of memories and so on.
Well, I don't promote the giving a direction or going to the event. I promote, let's see what's present right here, right now.
Yeah. It's interesting. Hey, did you notice that you're holding your fist like this? Things like that, like things that are showing up in present time. Hey, I noticed you apologize for yourself, or hey, you dropped an F-bomb and I noticed that you apologize for it.
Yes.
Let's talk more about that. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're back in the past or something.
Precisely. Via what's happening, what's evident, what can be seen, what can be felt in the present, because the behavior is demonstrating the experience from decades ago. Even though it happened decades ago, the programming is being repeated in the present in the therapeutic space also. For example, giggling when saying, "Here, I got raped today." Yeah, well, what is that about? What is the giggling about? What is the giggling? What is the behavior covering? And making the person aware because they may not even be aware. It's just so automatic and it's part of their behavioral repertoire that there's no cognition, no awareness of what's present here now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an art to that, right? Because it's kind of like you don't want to be rude and say, what are you covering up with that giggle of yours?
What are you doing there? Yes, right. Well, and the magic, and I think that for any therapeutic treatment, for anything, even psychedelic-assisted therapy, the magic sauce is the relationship. There must be a relationship between the patient and the therapist before we can advance with any treatment. And that takes time. It's not something that can be created in 1 or 2 sessions. Although this treatment that I teach, and I've seen evidence of it working relatively faster than one modality or focus on just one modality, I feel is the fastest way of making progress.
So yeah, psychedelics, quite interesting. We're in the so-called second psychedelic renaissance and so on. And there's a big split in approaches and understandings and relationships with psychedelics, from ranging from in this massive continuum from, it's the holy grail it's the clinical holy grail, and it's the future, and it's like makes things right. A lot of people say, I hear this a lot actually. You can do 6 years of therapy in a weekend in one psychedelic integration session and blah, blah, blah. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have basically psychedelic compounds and mushrooms and things like that. And people that are into the healing arts and Taoism and energy talk and stuff like that are devil worshipers.
Oh, wow.
So you like have this really wide range of like, it's the holy grail and it's the scientific future and it's like radically clinically efficient and effective to, these people are devil worshipers. Can you just give us your sense of the good, the bad, and the ugly of psychedelics?
The medicines that I teach clinicians how to use are mainly the legal ones, which is cannabis and ketamine. The experiences that we look to create are really the psycholytic. And the psycholytic is when the individual is cognitive present, and it's just tapping into the core of the trauma, but it's not so dissociated that they're into another galaxy.
Yeah.
Because there's no point there. There's no point in going to another galaxy. I mean, it sounds like a nice Band-Aid, and a lot of these ketamine clinics create those experiences, but they don't heal anything at the core. It covers things.
I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would want to do a sales pitch for intergalactic travel, though. Just saying.
Well, sure, if that's what the person wants to do, it's all fine and dandy.
Yeah, okay.
Who am I to not
put a pitch out there for the galactic travelers out there?
Yeah, and then meeting
galactic traveler, devil worshiper. Like choose your own adventure. I mean, I don't know. It's like
I don't know. The thing is that we focus on what's happening in the body. It's not spirituality can be brought into the table, but I prefer that the patient brings it on for itself, for him or herself. Not because we're prompting it to happen, but because the person realizes, oh, wow, I'm still here. My spirit is light full of life and joy and contentment and healing and all those beautiful things.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of smuggling in of belief systems. That's one of the kind of thoughts about one of the shadows of all healing arts, and all healing approaches, and even religious and spiritual approaches to healing, where the helper is smuggling in. They might think that they're holding a neutral position, but they're smuggling in and kind of doing almost like in a hypnotherapeutic suggestion way, adding pieces that come from the practitioner into the client and actually doing some kind of shady stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, and one of the things that I really like teaching my clinicians is that words have power, and being mindful and careful of the language being used in the therapeutic space. Positive words like freedom, joy, and contentment, those are beautiful. And creating shifts with language alone, that's powerful. Words have the power of changing people from their core, not on a deep level, but opens the window, opens the opportunities and possibilities for change and shifts. Yeah. Whereas, for example, trying something, well, the experience of trying doesn't get you much anywhere. Not, certainly not very far.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to doing and creating, well, that's far more progressive than trying alone.
Mm-hmm.
So the teaching of language is so valuable because even colors, something like purple or yellow or red, creates a motion, a shift, a rainbow of things to come.
Mm-hmm.
As a marker on the side of the road again.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that it's being very careful with language, using simple language, because the language of neurology is actually very childlike, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Children, they do a pretty good job of expressing freedom and vitality.
Yes.
So I'm cautious of this adulting movement. I'm like, it's kind of a head scratcher for me. It's like, well, I get it, like, let's see if we can self-regulate and be responsible, morally responsible, and be ethical human beings, and
Yes.
Sure, we have different ethical standards and ethical and moral complexities compared to children. Yes.
Right.
But like if adulting looks like, hey, let's get more rigid and less vital and have less of a sense of humor, and we can't, be something other than ourselves. Like I was watching the kids play yesterday and they're perfectly happy being something other than themselves.
Yes.
Like I'm going to play being a unicorn, and it's not really playing being a unicorn. It's like actually being a unicorn. And it's such a relief to not be Brian sometimes. Yeah. I mean, do you like to like periodically not be Zina sometimes, and just like it's really freeing, and it's like, okay, let's be an antelope or something like that. And what a relief.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. I find that fun. I actually engage in dance. I love to dance, salsa dance, even though I go to a class. I don't follow the steps and I create my own. And I'm brown and I can get away with it because I'm brown. Maybe not, but it doesn't matter. To me, it's freedom, is sometimes going to a dance that is techno and it's MDA music and it's loud and there's laser lights and just letting it all hang out and
yeah,
rocking out with chakras out.
Rock it out with your chakras out. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I was a child of the '90s rave scene, and I was just like, yeah, the glow sticks are out. Yeah, oh my goodness, rocking it out. Yeah, that's cool.
Yes.
Well, let's see here. I think it's interesting that, cannabis is being used clinically. I talked to somebody not too long ago on the show about using cannabis clinically. And because it doesn't get a lot of press for being a clinical aid, but it would make sense. So like for some people, it's just going to help them to relieve the repression barrier. But my general, and maybe the audience might be tired of this joke, maybe not. My general joke is that the people that most need to use psychedelics and psychedelic adjacent substances, the ones that could benefit the most are the least likely to take them.
Oh, right.
And the ones that are the most likely to take them, and just like hear discussions like this would be like, oh yeah, give me the cannabis in therapy. Those are the ones that are, though they may benefit, are the ones that will benefit less than the people that need them the most. So I'm trying to like mobilize a sales pitch for those of you out there that are the most allergic to taking things like cannabis and psychedelics. Now, granted, safety does matter, there is a particular age group with especially very potent cannabis and,
Right.
THC. You know where I'm going with this,
Oh,
right?
I know. I know what
The
you mean.
20 something age groups, like,
Right.
folks, be careful, right? I mean, it is, like, psychosis is a real danger with this
Oh, it
really
is a real risk.
intense THC out there, especially if you're in
Yes.
your 20s and you're male and you have
Oh,
a,
right. Particular, the more modern strains that are
yeah,
so potent. Yes.
so potent. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. Well, also work with cannabis and at a very small doses and just enough to feel, just enough so that people can feel their breath and feel the expansion of lungs and the collapse of lungs and seeing what's there, what's underneath lungs, what's inside organs, what does it feel to have organs, if they feel anything or if they're dissociated, what's it like when they breathe or they feel the air moving up and down the esophagus, all of that. And cannabis is a great substance for sensation. It brings sensations up to awareness, and just sensations just flower with cannabis. And there's a particular
The sensations flower with cannabis. There we go. We have, you get it?
Of course, I did it on purpose. Yeah, they do. And there's a particular strain that we prefer to work with that actually helps access body sensations.
Can I ask what that is? Is that okay if I ask what strain?
Oh, yeah, it's not a secret.
Okay, good. Just checking.
It's sativa. We like to work with flower sativa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a vape.
And you're doing it in an edible format?
No, edibles are inconsistent.
I see.
And it doesn't always render the same results. We like to work with vapes only.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
with vapes, one is able to control. So taking half a puff and seeing how that feels. So we go about it systematically.
So it's very slow. It's very kind of parsed out, and you're really granular and nuanced with administering at a slow tempo and pace.
Right. And we also suggest for people to, if they're already using cannabis as a substance, as a recreational substance, we suggest for people to use less or titrate out of it so that the medicine can be used fully as a tool for healing. And yes, it changes the relationship between the body and the substance, where they now have a different relationship. And yes, it changes the way that the person uses it. Unfortunately, people find themselves using it recreationally, and now the body wants to work. No, let's get to work. It's not a fun time anymore.
Yeah.
Yes. So that people are cautioned that if they would like to integrate cannabis into their treatment, that it's just going to change things inside of them. Not for the worse, but it happens naturally, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a term called state addiction.
Okay.
Where folks can get addicted to the state. I mean, I suppose I can put my hand up for, there's a time in my life where I was really addicted to this state of a deep healing encounter. And I would just go to workshop after workshop and men's group after men's group and cathartic experience after cathartic experience. And then, a similar thing, like people, though cannabis may not be as biologically, it doesn't induce biological dependence perhaps as much as alcohol in some. The state addictions, and I think this cuts across other classes of drugs, including ketamine and other psychedelic substances, people can get addicted to the state of, and then so just, do you have any comments about that? You see folks that go in the direction of using it, too much outside of therapy, and you're like, whoa, hang on, we need to kind of back up from that and kind of reassess. Mm-hmm. You have any markers or cautionary notes around that?
Well, like I said earlier, the magic formula or the secret sauce to psychedelic therapy is the relationship.
Yeah.
Because these things are not creating in a vacuum, they're creating relationship.
Yeah.
And people only heal in relationship with We don't heal in isolation.
Yeah.
And sharing these things adds a level of accountability for the individual also. Not that we hold people accountable. We don't. It just happens naturally as a result, as a consequence of treatment.
I
I
see.
haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen that happen in our practice, but good to look out for.
Oh, where somebody is like all of a sudden taking 3 hits a day because they had such great therapeutic benefits that they just want to keep on going
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yes, I haven't seen it. None of our patients have expressed that behavior that I know of. I
Well,
mean,
sounds like you're as part of your intake process, you're trying to assess for folks that have already existing dependencies. You're screening for that. It sounds like.
oh, we do that. We
Yeah.
do that. And I'm not an addiction specialist, though I know and I am aware that trauma and addiction, they're good friends to each other. And,
Yeah.
and trauma causes addiction. And it's a
Well,
byproduct.
some even say that PTSD is traumatic itself, meaning like with a flashback, you get a hit of endogenous opioids,
Oh,
and that
right.
there's some secondary gains that can be there in keeping the PTSD. And there's this assumption if you're traumatized that you're always going to want to heal, and that research challenges that there
Huh.
could be an addictive element just to the PTSD itself.
Correct. Yes. And yes, the release of cortisol can be addicted in and by itself just because it's proving itself right. It's
Yeah.
familiar, going back to the familiar and familiar and comfort, even though it's uncomfortable to be there.
Yeah.
That happens too.
Yeah.
But the thing is that trauma and the triggering of trauma is addicted in and by itself because the organism also seeks for those events. It creates a traumatic environment that recreates inside of itself. Of course, there's that too.
Yeah. Well, okay, Zina, I think we should wrap this up, even though we could just keep on going with it. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you and hearing
Thank
about
you.
your work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I have enjoyed this conversation with you. Thank you once again.
Yeah, likewise. Is there anything that you'd like to pitch, or would you like to say anything more about how folks can find Elephant in the Room? Or
Yes.
how do folks find out the elephant in the room?
Well, there's a website, and right now we are undergoing a major facelift for that website. It's going to be at one point a directory, but for now it's a web page with everybody's information, all my clinicians' information. We provide medicine support with our own psychiatrist. We have a social worker clinician who is also a supervisor, including myself and the rest of the team, and they're all LPCs in training. And the website is elephantintheroomllc.com. Very easy.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being on the show, Zina.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Yeah.
B.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you for listening to the Boundless Body Podcast. Please like us, share, subscribe, and until next time, stabilize, catalyze, and thrive